Oh yeah,
for Led Zeppelin.
I could have been at least. Look, it could have been anything at that point. You got to understand.
That's why I think I've got the Redskins blues.
The biggest surprise is that Terry didn't make it as a big star.
People remember Terry Reid because there was always the rumor that he was supposed to be the original singer of Led Zeppelin back in the day, but he had his own solo career, so he did that.
Terry was probably the best singer of that period.
He could sing jazz, he could sing folk, he can rip rock as hard as Rod Stewart.
Well, he was one of the best, white people with soul.
When in danger, and we are as we stand.
When Led Zeppelin first arrived in the United States, the music was altogether new.
Did you audition for Led Zeppelin, or was that an urban myth?
It is the ultimate rock and roll sliding doors moment. Jimmy Page is piecing together a new band from the ashes of the Yardbirds. He needs a frontman, a voice, a star. He dials up a young singer whose first album is making waves. That singer, just 19, tells him, "Jimmy, I can't. I've already committed to the Stones." And in doing so, Terry Reid, knowingly or not, steps away from the front line of rock legend and into a more complex, winding path that will come to define him. "I just didn't want to go back on my word," Reid has said many times, the weight of that moment both blessing and burden. "I'd already said yes to touring with the Stones, and that meant something."
I got to know Jimmy real well. Then a few years go by, and we all go off doing what we're doing. And then Jimmy on the phone calls me up one day and says he's putting a group together. Right,
Just a little band.
another band.
Yeah, sure.
Right? You know, Yardbirds number 14 or something.
There you
like
go.
that. So I said, "Well, what is it?" And he says, "Well, I've got a bass player and I'm putting it together." I said, "Well, I'm going on tour, and when I come back, yeah, it sounds great, you know." So we went out with the Stones.
The man who famously turned down Led Zeppelin, and later Deep Purple, might have seemed, to the casual observer, to have missed the train. But Reid's story is not one of near misses and misfortune. It is the story of a singular artist who repeatedly chose principle over promise and art over acclaim.
The man with the guitar is Terry Reid. He's a legend you've never heard of. Opened for the Stones before he turned 20, asked by Jimmy Page to join his band, a band that would become Led Zeppelin. And he couldn't at the time, he was busy. And now, after years in the musical wilderness, Terry Reid's trying to revive his recording career.
It was always very obvious to me that Terry was a phenomenal singer and had great talent, even at a young age.
Born in the market town of St Neots, Cambridgeshire, and raised in nearby Huntingdon, Terry Reid was immersed in music from an early age. Like many British teenagers of the early 60s, he fell in love with American blues, soul, and early rock and roll. The voices of Ray Charles, Sam Cooke, and Little Richard filtering through late-night radio broadcasts and the scratch of 45s. He began playing guitar and singing in local bands before he'd even left school. His talent was unmistakable, a mature, muscular voice that defied his years and seemed capable of anything. Delicate falsetto, raw rasp, gospel shout. By the age of 15, he had joined Peter J and the Jaywalkers, a clean-cut R&B outfit who found themselves supporting the Rolling Stones on their 1966 British tour. That tour was transformative. Reid, then still a teenager, was suddenly playing to thousands, sharing stages with one of the biggest bands in the world. Mick Jagger took notice. So did producer Mickey Most, the man behind the success of The Animals, Donovan, and Herman's Hermits. Together, Jagger and Most saw in Reid not just promise, but superstardom. The voice, the look, the fearlessness, it was all there. Terry was the real deal, most would later say. I thought he'd be the biggest star in the country.
It was the hottest thing in London. Everybody was talking about him. This is the next big thing to come out of London.
Reid's solo debut, Bang Bang, You're Terry Reid, arrived as the summer of love faded and British rock was shifting from pop to psychedelia.
Bang, bang, you shot me down. Bang, bang, I hit the ground. Bang, bang, that awful sound.
It was a bold, brash album that showcased his vocal dynamism. Produced by most, it included covers of songs by Sonny Bono and Bob Dylan, alongside originals that hinted at Reid's broader ambitions.
Terry associated more with kind of the black music at that time. He's got that kind of sound.
But Reid wasn't content with being a pop star. He didn't want to sing radio-friendly singles to suit his producer's plans. The second album, simply titled Terry Reid, veered into deeper, looser musical territory. Tracks like Superlungs My Supergirl and Stay With Me Baby revealed a singer less interested in chart placement than in crafting something lasting. It was during this crucial period that the call came from Jimmy Page. Page, seeking a lead singer for his new group, viewed Reid as the natural choice. But Reid declined. He was already committed to supporting the Rolling Stones in America and didn't feel right backing out. Instead, he recommended a young singer from the Midlands named Robert Plant, whom he'd seen perform with Band of Joy, and tipped off Page about a drummer named John Bonham. The rest is legend.
You know what? A penny dropped. I went, this is exactly what Jimmy should do, you know. Well, anyway, needless to say, that's the story. And so I turned Jimmy onto him, and that became Led Zeppelin. That was it. Right? I said, you got to get the drummer, though. Not just, he said, what does the singer look like? I went, well, he looks a damn sight better than you do.
It was a gesture made in time, and the only reason it's worth talking about now is because of what happened afterwards.
I had other things going, Reid said. I was flattered, of course, but it wasn't meant to be.
Jimmy Page famously asked you to join Led Zeppelin, and you suggested, I believe, Robert Plant. What happened there?
I didn't know how it was going to be. Nobody knew. Terry wouldn't have known how it was going to be for him had he taken the option.
Soon after, Deep Purple made a similar offer. Once again, Reid said no. He wasn't interested in being a frontman for hire. He wanted to chart his own course.
You know, what would have happened had Terry and Jimmy Page started making music together? I don't know.
Signed to Mickey Most at such a young age was stifling.
Terry gets an average of 3% per record, which goes up. I find that fair because it costs him nothing.
Reid's refusal to be moulded would come at a cost. His growing creative differences with Mickey Most erupted into a contractual battle that effectively froze his recording career. Locked into a binding agreement with a producer he no longer trusted, and unable to release new music freely, Reid found himself in professional limbo. Rather than stay and fight, he left for America. California offered freedom, sunshine, open roads, and musicians who operated outside the rigid confines of the British pop machine. Reid embedded himself in the Laurel Canyon scene, becoming close with David Crosby, Graham Nash, Linda Ronstadt, and Jackson Browne. These were musicians for whom authenticity was everything, and Reid fit right in. In Los Angeles, he began recording again, this time on his own terms. The result was River, a smouldering, swampy album produced by Tom Dowd, the legendary engineer behind records by Wilson Pickett, the Allman Brothers, and Derek and the Dominos. River was unlike anything Reid had released before, sultry, fluid, and drenched in atmosphere.
He goes down to the river again to find to be.
The title track, a sinuous 7-minute journey, opened with a slow groove and bloomed into a soulful crescendo, while Dean and Dream offered hazy, mournful reflections. "I wanted the music to feel like it was breathing," Reid said of River. "No pressure, just movement." Critics loved it. Audiences, largely unfamiliar with his name due to his prolonged absence, were slower to catch on. River received little promotion and didn't chart, but it laid the foundation for Reid's artistic rebirth. Three years later came Seed of Memory, Reid's most fully realized work. Produced by Graham Nash and released on ABC Records, it combined Reid's British rock roots with the warmth and introspection of California's singer-songwriter movement. Tracks like Brave Awakening, Faith to Arise, and the title track Unfurled Slowly, rich in lyrical detail and texture. On To Be Treated Right, a tender, aching plea for compassion, Reid distilled his frustrations, his defiance, and his vulnerability into one of the most affecting performances of his career. "People think I was angry," he later said, "but I wasn't angry. I just wanted the chance to do things my way." Nash, reflecting on the sessions, called Reid an alchemist of tone and mood. You never knew what direction he'd take, but it always led somewhere beautiful. Despite the critical acclaim, Seed of Memory was not a commercial hit. It lacked a hit single, was hard to pigeonhole, and again received limited label support. Yet it has endured. Decades later, film director Rob Zombie would use the title track in The Devil's Rejects, introducing Reid to a new generation of listeners. For much of the 80s and 90s, Reid operated in the shadows. He became a highly sought-after session singer and guitarist, appearing on albums by Don Henley, Bonnie Raitt, Joe Walsh, and Willie Nelson. His voice, more lived in, but no less commanding, became a secret ingredient, instantly recognizable to those in the know. But he never chased the limelight. There were no comebacks, no glossy reinventions. Reid played small clubs and occasional festivals, often disappearing for years at a time. He turned down a Las Vegas residency. He refused to join nostalgia tours. He turned away offers to pen a tell-all memoir. "I wasn't interested in becoming a brand," he said. "I was interested in the music." Among fellow musicians, his legend only grew. Jack White described Reid as the bridge between British blues and American soul. Chris Robinson of the Black Crowes credited Seed of Memory with changing how he thought about song structure. Even Robert Plant, the man who had taken the Zeppelin gig, spoke of Reid with deep reverence. "He had the golden voice," Plant said, "and he gave me the chance of a lifetime."
And my lane with the cool siding sashes spread some dreams down there with the battle below. Brings love with a song that she passes, so that you and I will know that it's gotta be for the country. Cause there's that song that's
Terry was
in your heart.
I think is the best rock vocalist.
Terry Reid, he made some great albums in the 70s.
And he's definitely someone we kind of look up to, and you kind of say when you grow up you want to be like Terry Reid.
I think there are very few people that can sing the way that he does and make you believe every single word.
In 2016, Light in the Attic Records released The Other Side of the River, a collection of unreleased tracks from the River sessions. The album revealed a more experimental Reid, layering tracks, building grooves, and fusing genres with an almost painterly precision. Critics hailed it as a lost masterpiece. Pitchfork described it as music that feels both ancient and prophetic, like something you forgot you loved. Suddenly, Reid was back in the conversation. Younger artists began name-checking him in interviews. His songs found their way onto streaming playlists. To Be Treated Right was sampled in hip-hop tracks. A new audience, unencumbered by the Led Zeppelin mythology, was discovering Reid for what he had always been: a singular voice, a defiant soul, an artist's artist. He began touring again, often accompanied only by an acoustic guitar and a sense of mischief. His live sets blended old favourites with improvised new material. At a gig in London, he cracked a smile and told the crowd, "You waited 40 years, hope it was worth it."
But he's never had an identity crisis. He's never changed. This is one of the magic things about Terry. He's always been Terry Reid. You get what you see, and that's it, and that's magic.
If he hasn't become a big star, it was not because of him.
Now in his 70s, Reid remains philosophical about his journey. He never won awards, he never topped charts, but he never surrendered his principles either. "You can have fame, or you can have freedom," he said recently. "Some lucky bastards get both. I chose the latter."
To this day, he just still sounds great. I've always been a big fan of his.
There is something profoundly British about Terry Reid's refusal to play the game, a stubborn, poetic streak that recalls the likes of Nick Drake, John Martin, or Kevin Coyne. Like them, Reid's art was more important than his career. He was not built for the machinery of stardom. And yet his fingerprints are everywhere, in the voices of Robert Plant, Chris Cornell, and even Jeff Buckley.
He's an incredible singer. He has a great sense of music. He has a great sense of rhythm, a great sense of chord structure.
His songs have been covered by the Hollies, Cheap Trick, Marianne Faithfull, and the Raconteurs. His influence outstripped his profile. He was a ghost in the grooves.
Maybe Terry Reid's time is about to come.
Today, Reid splits his time between the UK and the US, playing when he feels like it, recording when inspiration strikes. He remains warm, affable, slightly elusive, the way he's always been. "I never disappeared," he likes to remind people. "I just kept moving." The man who said no to Led Zeppelin, who fought his way free from contracts and expectations, who made some of the most soulful British records of the 70s, deserves more than a footnote in rock history. He deserves a chapter all his own. Because in the end, Terry Reid didn't just follow his own path, he paved it. Quietly, stubbornly, beautifully.
It's true.